Hello everyone, welcome and thank you for tuning into my channel. Today I will be talking about the disagreement between Paul and Peter. Because the disagreement between Paul and Peter reveals a lot about early church dynamics and the struggle to define what it really meant to follow Christ, especially for Gentiles, non-Jews. Where does it happen? It's the main confrontation is recorded in Galatians chapter 2, verses 11 to 14. When Paul says, "But when Cephas or Peter came to Antioch, I opposed him to his face because he stood condemned." What was the issue? Peter had been freely eating with Gentile Christians, something Jewish law normally prohibited. But when certain people came from James, a Jewish leader in Jerusalem, Peter withdrew and separated himself, fearing criticism from the circumcision group or Jewish Christian who insisted in following Mosaic law. This act caused division. Even Barnabas and others started doing the same. Paul saw it as hypocrisy and called Peter out publicly because Peter knew better. He had previously received a vision from God in the book of Acts, chapter 10, that declared Gentiles clean and accepted by God. Peter's action contradicted the gospel of grace and unity in Christ. His influence was leading others astray, creating a two-tiered church, Jewish Christian versus Gentile Christians. Now, what is the Paul's standpoint? Paul argued that salvation is by grace through faith, not by works in the law. Galatians chapter 2 verse 16. Mixing law with grace was a step backward. To Paul, the gospel broke down the wall between Jew and Gentile. Was it resolved? The Bible doesn't explicitly describe Peter's response, but later accounts, like in Peter's letters, show no bitterness. Peter even refers to Paul's writing with respect. 2 Peter chapter 3 verses 15 to 16. This suggests reconciliation and mutual respect despite their different roles and temperaments. Why it matters today. This disagreement reminds us that even spiritual leaders can fall into fear and peer pressure, but accountability and love is part of walking in truth. It also affirms that grace, not culture or tradition, is the foundation of Christian unity. So let me just continue with this when apostles disagree. What we learn from Paul in Peter's confrontation, in the early days of the church, even the apostles didn't always see eye to eye. One of the most striking moments of disagreement happened between two of its most prominent leaders, Paul and Peter. This wasn't a private theological debate. According to Galatians chapter 2, verses 11 to 14, Paul writes, "When Cephas, Peter, came to Antioch, I opposed him to his face because he stood condemned." Strong words. What caused Paul to confront Peter so boldly? Peter had been fellowshipping with Gentile believers in Antioch, eating with them and enjoying their company. This was a big deal because under Jewish law, associating with Gentiles in this way was seen as unclean. But Peter, having received a vision from God in the book of Acts chapter 10, knew better. He had learned that God shows no favoritism. But when certain Jewish believers from James arrived, Peter began to withdraw from the Gentiles, fearing criticism from the circumcision group, Jewish Christians who still believe in keeping the law of Moses. His actions weren't just personal. This sent a message. Other Jewish believers, including Barnabas, followed his lead and began pulling away too. Paul saw this as more than a social blunder. It was hypocrisy, and it contradicted the very truth of the gospel they all preached. Paul's response didn't hold back. He called out Peter publicly not to shame him, but to defend the integrity of the gospel. In Paul's words, we know that a person is not justified by the works of the law, but through faith in Jesus Christ. Galatians chapter 2, verse 16. For Paul, the issue was crystal clear. The gospel of grace unites, not divides. When Peter withdrew from the Gentiles, he sent a signal that their faith in Christ alone wasn't enough, that they somehow needed to become more Jewish to be fully accepted. Paul couldn't let that message stand. Was the rift permanent? The Bible doesn't record Peter's immediate reaction, but we find clues later on in Second Peter chapter 3 verses 15 and 16 when Peter refers to Paul as a beloved brother and acknowledges the wisdom in his letters. That says a lot. This suggests the disagreement, though sharp, didn't result in division, but in deeper understanding and respect. They were both human, after all, learning how to walk out the radical implications of grace in a world still divided by tradition and fear. What this teaches us, even spiritual giants can be inconsistent. Fear of criticism, desire for approval, and peer pressure are real temptations for leaders and followers alike. But what stands out is the courage of Paul to speak the truth in love, the humility of Peter to receive correction. This story reminds us that grace is the unshakable foundation of the gospel. Unity in Christ goes beyond cultural and religious barriers. Truth and love must walk hand in hand, even in disagreement. Let's not be afraid of honest conversations when the truth is at stake. And let's be willing to be corrected when we drift because in the end, it's not about us. It's about reflecting Christ faithfully to the world. And I hope you find some value in this short video. I hope to see you next time. Bye now.